Kate,
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
good.
Recording naman. Yep.
All right, so I'll begin in three, two. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to once again the UAPSA-Litaan Season 9. Where I said that's awkwardly. UAPSA-Litaan Season 9, the vulnerable and the vernacular. Of course, I am one of your hosts for today. I am Josh Daquipil, and I am joined by the lovely.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Zoo Bennett. You can call me Zoo. I'm from the UAPSA-NU and yeah, this is our podcast, Season 9,
Yes.
Episode 5. How are you? Before we go into our core of the podcast, how are you there, Josh?
I am doing great. I actually forgot to add also. I'm also a member of UAPSA-AdDU when I was in my second year. And yeah, Zoo is UAPSA-NU. So this UAPSA Unite right here. And I'm doing good, Zoo. Although there are a lot of tropical storm warnings here in Davao and Visayas also. I'm doing good. How about you over there?
Yeah, well, luckily we don't have that here yet, and
hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Yeah, I wish
Yeah.
you guys to be safe, and the people there.
Yeah.
Well, in Philippines, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And well, just for everyone's information, this is actually not the first time Zoo and I have interacted. We've also had pre-production things you were talking about. We never actually got to know each other, Zoo. Never actually got to know each other. So do you want to do the honors? Do you want to let me know where you're from? Why were you chosen to be this host for this episode specifically? What makes you unique? Oh my god, yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll start. So the reason I'm chosen to be one of the hosts for this episode is I'm not sure. Am I unique or no, kidding. Kate told me that we are talking about the walkability of the countries we've been to and comparing them to the Philippines, because recently I've been to Europe just 2 months ago. Yeah, I had my summer program in Prague there, so I stayed for 2 months to 3 months there, and then had another 1 month to travel around. So pretty much I have seen not really most, but cool places in Europe. So yeah,
you have your little mini Euro trip throughout your life. Sana all.
Sana all. Euro trip. But it's not that full blown, because still in the pandemic,
yeah,
there are many restrictions. How about you? Josh?
Me, why I was specifically chosen. Well, just for heads up for anyone, Kate is actually our productions here in our podcast. She's just behind the scene, working it out. And she was actually also the one that also approached me. We were actually classmates back in grade 10.
Wow.
And yeah, so I guess this is our reconnection, Kate. But anyways, I guess she chose me because you and I also have a background being in a foreign country as well. So I was also able to witness the cityscapes, the different environments of foreign countries. Just a little thing about me, I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I lived there for 10 years. And then I moved to Australia and I lived there for 5 years. And then now I'm in the Philippines, currently for 8 years, diba? Worldwide, Mr. Worldwide.
Yeah, we have the local version of Mr. Worldwide here, everyone.
Yes, I'm the local Mr. Worldwide. And and I guess today I'll also be, trying to share my experiences. And of course, we'll all be just talking about our different perspective and experiences of different countries. But one thing I noticed a zoo, when I in Hong Kong and Australia, I couldn't find the life. Where's the life? But when I went to Philippines, I knew life was there. Life is here in the Philippines. Life is here.
Of course, I have to agree with you that. So, if you don't mind me asking, what's not really the best, because Philippines is the best, but
I mean, obviously, of course it is.
What's the closest thing you'll describe that you like the most in the countries you've been to, for example, Hong Kong and Australia?
Okay, not going too deep into the topic discussion, just giving a little hint or the tip of the iceberg, I guess you could say. Hong Kong, it has to be the transportation. I'm just gonna get that out of the way. Love
Yeah.
the transportation in Hong Kong. I cannot get lost. Even if you're a tourist, like it's so easy to travel.
Yeah.
Australia has to be the openness, the environment, because it's everywhere in Australia. It's so open. It's not tight knit. Even if you're in a city, like the planning there, it's not tight. There's so much spaces. It's so open. This feeling of openness.
That's cool.
And the Philippines, it's the people talaga. It's the
Of
people.
course, like Filipinos are.
Filipinos are a different level. I mean, how about you, Zu? I'm a throw that question back at you. How about out of all your little mini Euro trip, what was the little highlight of every
Like,
country
I
you've been
have
to?
to like add something that I like the most in Hong Kong. Like I've been to Hong Kong before,
Oh
and what
yeah.
I like the most there is when you get to buy things in the night market. Like usually here in the Philippines, you get to tawad, right? Like you get to bargain for the price to
Yeah.
be lower.
Yeah.
But in Hong Kong, like oh my god, they're so cool. Like they're the ones like the sellers. They're the ones who's making
Yeah.
tawad. Like okay, you can get
Yeah,
this
exactly.
low price. Oh my god, this is so cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's also what I love about Hong Kong. Do you have that experience in Europe?
Sorry, no, not at all. Only in Hong Kong.
I
But
see.
the Europe thing, what I like the most about that, yeah, I have to agree. The public transportation, like when I was traveling from my apartment to my school, the commute system, because it's so light. Like you can literally arrive in your class still fresh.
Wow, sana all fresh. No. In
so
Arki fresh? Are you sure, Zoo? I think you're lying. Joke lang.
Somehow, of course, it's supposed to be fresh, but yeah, in Arki, I don't want to comment about it. All right, I think.
So yeah, so I think our little chikahan is okay na Zoo. We're able to share with everyone else about a little background. And without further ado, I think it's important that we now announce or introduce our guest for today's episode. Now, just a little briefer, he was actually part of the European Union climate negotiating team and also a former member of the Standing Committee on Finance and Climate Convention. Now, recently in the Philippines, the Embassy of the Netherlands in Manila partnered with the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, or ICSC, to convene a 3-part webinar series entitled Climate Change and COVID-19 Adapting to Two New Normals. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Honorable Pieter Terpstra. Sir Pieter, welcome.
Sir Pieter.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast. And it's great to be here. So
we're so glad to have you, Makika, all the way there. We can't wait for a little time.
So where are you now, Sir Pieter? Where are you residing now?
I live in Makati. So I've been in the Philippines for 2.5 years. So so it's been great. Though I've been a lot inside. I've seen a lot of my garden, but I hope to go out and visit Davao. So hopefully soon we're gonna open an honorary consulate there. So I'll definitely travel to Davao. Hopefully early next year.
Before Sir Pieter, before you came here in the Philippines, like if you don't mind us asking, like where have you been? Like which countries?
Where have you been all my life?
All our lives.
Well, in a lot of places, traveling around. But right before coming to the Philippines, I was in the Netherlands. As you said, I was part of the EU climate finance negotiations under the Climate Finance Convention. But before that, I was in the United States, in Washington, D.C. And before that, I lived in Tokyo, in Japan. And I lived in Bangladesh, Dhaka, and then again, Netherlands, and before that in Senegal. And I also, when I studied, did part of my studies in Indonesia and in Kenya and in Curacao. So I'm by training, I'm a marine biologist, specializing in tropical marine ecology. And I also did financial economics. So it's with the finance and environment.
Wow. Zoo, I think we have to give the Mr. Worldwide title. We have to pass it over. I have to move over. I've only been to 3. Sir Pieter here has been through the entire map, it sounds like.
Yeah, a lot. Well, Sir Peter, aside from the Philippines, which country do you think you want that you most enjoyed? Like aside from
What are
yeah.
some highlights out of all the countries you've just named? What are some highlights? Because ours sound boring now, whatever you're gonna mention.
Yeah, true.
No. Well, I think every country has its own sort of things that make it special. And so I don't know. I did like living in Washington D.C. because we lived in a very nice neighborhood. And we had very good friends there, and still if we go there, we can stay in our old house and we visit all our neighbors. So that's nice. But like Bangladesh, I mean, it's not an easy country to live sometimes. But it's very if you go outside of Dhaka, it's very beautiful. It's a lot of water, a lot of green, a lot of people, of course. And also like Japan in Tokyo, it's a massive city. But it has a lot of culture and a lot of parks and a lot of musea and shrines where you can visit. And we drove around a lot on different islands, so that's also nice. And Senegal is, of course, where I lived, is very, very different. It's West Africa. It's close to the Sahara, so it's very dry, a lot of dust. But you have certain. I worked for an NGO which worked on nature conservation. So there are a lot of wetlands, so lakes where massive amount of birds come. So if you go to these lakes, it's in the middle of the desert. You see like thousands of birds, and it's really beautiful. So so I think every country has its the things that make it nice and make it different and special. So, and the same for the Philippines. And unfortunately, I haven't been that much out of the city, and Manila is pretty big and pretty intense. But it's nice. Yeah, as you say, the people are very friendly, and of course, you can go. I've been to some places, to Cebu and to El Nido. So it's really beautiful. So,
have you been to one of the beaches here?
Well, I've been to Mabini and to Anilao. Yeah, so those. That's in the So, but not as much as I like. But now, hopefully, things will get better, so we can move around a bit.
Yeah. Well, you did mention earlier you were able to visit a lot of these countries, and one thing I'd like to know is like, how is the overall commuting experience in these countries? Like if we compare like a developing country commuting experience to like a developing country, let's just say the US and the Philippines, like is it necessarily, is it automatic in a sense that, just because the US is a first world country, it automatically has like a better commuting system? Or what's your thoughts on that, on the commuting systems in general, and like compared to all these countries that you've been to?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Is when you started this question, I thought, it's probably the public transport that is better in sort of developed countries. But you pick the United States, and their public transport is
probably a bad example.
I have to agree with you.
Bad example there.
But like in the Netherlands, I really like taking the bus. It's very comfortable, and also what I like, and it's also in Japan as well. It's the connections that you can make. So the transport node. So in the Netherlands, you buy a bus ticket, or you have a card which you load money on. It's pretty much the same as in Hong Kong. You take the bus, but then you come to the train station with the bus, and there's also like a bike parking where you can rent bikes with the same ticket. Yeah. So you just walk into there have hundreds of bikes. You tap your ticket on the lock, and that opens the bike, and you can take your bike. And those kind of things are that's what I like about, for instance, commuting in the Netherlands. In the United States, as I said, public transport. I had to take public transport there, but I don't know if you've been in DC. It's terrible. The metro just catches fire when you're on the metro.
Oh no!
So then they have to stop, and then everybody has to go out, and there's smoke, and so that's not a good example. And also biking in the US is they're not really used to bikes and have big cars. So and it's also a little bit here. I mean, I think Manila is doing great in investing in biking infrastructure, and also as an embassy, we support a lot of that work. But people are just not always used to bikes, so they think, if you pass a bike and you give it like 10 centimeters of space, that's enough. But as a biker, that's very scary. So you need a lot of distance actually when you take over a bike with a car. And like in the Netherlands, cars are used to that, so it's safe to drive a car. But in the States or in here, or even also in Bangladesh, also because the streets are smaller and the bike lanes are unprotected, so that makes commuting very different. Commuting in Senegal was tough because it's so hot. Here it's hot, but in Senegal it's really hot. so their biking was not always that easy. But I enjoy biking, and actually this weekend I'll probably go out and bike to Moa, to the Mall of Asia, or go to the south to Pasig, and it's just a nice way to see the city. If it's not raining, because we'll probably also have some part of the typhoon coming over. But
well, that sounds really good. I'll just ask, Sir Pieter, do you have like trams in Netherlands as well?
We have. We don't have that many cities that have subways, but we mostly have trams. So they're on a fixed rails in the street. But it's most cities just have buses. But of course, you see a lot of moves to make city centers car and bus free. So it's only walking or biking, and a lot more greenery. So actually, in the town where I live, our main shopping street, there's no cars there. You're not allowed, and you're also not allowed to bike. It's just walking. And it's the same in The Hague and parts of Utrecht or just big cities. They discourage taking the car or keep cars outside of the city center, period. And so they, like in Utrecht, they closed a lot of, then we had canals. They closed a lot of canals and made streets. But now they're actually taking away the streets, opening the canals again, and because it's good for your for people's happiness and for your enjoyment of living in a certain city if there's more greenery, and so most cities buses and bikeways, of course, and some cities still have trams, like Amsterdam has a tram system.
So yes, thank you, Zoo. So I just wanted to mention this because you did mention like a lot about the push towards free public transport, and I actually also had a lot of experience with that. And we talked about this during pre-production. I just want to bring it up because it was a really interesting topic. Like, because the first thing that popped into my head when we talk about free transportation is bikes and bike lanes, right? And of course, I think we have also seen a few bike lanes here and there in the Philippines. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think is, because you mentioned this in our pre-production, how bike lanes is like it's just a means of travel, like in other countries, right? But compared to here, it seems like it has like an image when you're riding a bike somewhere where it's closely related to like a social class, right? So what do you think? How do you think? Where do you think that stemmed from? Like this image, how bikes, if you ride a bike, oh, you probably can't afford this and that. Like, where do you think that stems from?
I don't know. I think that's a good question, but I think it wasn't different in the Netherlands in the 60s and 70s when people were just, they were coming basically out of the war and everything was destructed. And so when you had money, you could buy a car and you could show off like, I have money, I can buy a car. But I think now people start to realize, well, I don't need to have a big car to show off how well I'm doing. But that also is of course it's a whole social process. I mean, our king and our prime minister, they take the bike, and you have photos. Like I think it's a U.S. president who came to the Netherlands, and then they showed two photos of the U.S. president arriving with like big cars and helicopters, and the Dutch president arriving on his bicycle. And I think that those kind of images are are very important for people to see, like, oh, I can ride I can be well off and I can still ride a bike. And yeah, so that in the Netherlands, it's not really, if anything, if you have certain bikes that are quite expensive actually. So yeah, you can you can still show off even with your expensive bike. But in the Netherlands, yeah, it's just another form of transport. Like, well, the statistics are like in the Netherlands, there are more bicycles than people. Also, if you come to my house, we have, I have 2 kids and my wife, and I think we have 6 bikes or something among the 4 of us. And I don't know where they came from, but yeah, it's just it's a way of life, and it's also, it starts really young. That's I think I learned how to bike from my grandfather when I was 6 or 7 or something, and when we moved back from the States to the Netherlands, I think the first thing we did was buy bicycles for our kids so they can bike around, because all their friends also take the bike, so they go to the ice cream store, they go to the park, or they
do you have like those bikes where it's like a family bike, you all hop on in one, you guys pedal together?
Yeah, we used to have one of those like a cargo bike. Yeah, so it was like a big basket, so we could fit like 2 children. We have a dog, and then put some groceries, cool. And it's electric though, because it's pretty heavy, but it has a small motor. But yeah, it's very useful, and you see, yeah, and I think that's also the difference, for instance, in the States. It's a bit off topic, but there, if you want to do groceries, you need to drive for a long time. You need to buy like bulk amounts of food or whatever. But in the Netherlands, you have small stores. So you go with your bike, you have a basket on your bike or like a cargo bike, and you put your groceries in your bike and you bike home. And you do smaller shopping every day. And so it's, the whole city is also designed for short distance commutes using your bike. And yeah, so I think it's just a different way of how you design cities and how you think that people should live. And well, in the Netherlands, it's also, of course, we're focused on health. So it's it's stimulated that you bike and bike shorter distances, go to the store to buy groceries, as I said, or go to the sports club. And like my work when I live in the Netherlands is about 10 kilometers away. So, and for me, it doesn't matter. I can take the car, bus or bike. It's almost the same amount of time that it takes me to get to work. So, I prefer to go on my bike because, as you said, it's outside. It's healthy. Of course, when it's raining or snowing, then I'll take the bus. You have or
a snow bike. You guys don't have snow bikes that pedals the snow?
No. But, yeah, luckily it doesn't snow that much in the Netherlands, but yeah, it can be very cold though.
All right. Since we're talking about like bike and bike lanes, do you agree, or what do you think about the thing, since it's pandemic, right? So like almost everyone's commute system is bike. Like out of nowhere, like the Philippines turned into like a bike people thing. So like most of the ways had like mushrooms with the bike lanes. So do you think it's bike lanes should have a strategy plan for that, or can we just literally put bike lanes next to road with cars? Or yeah, what's your take about that?
Yeah, well, I think of course the Philippines was very much focused on just roads. So you have to retrofit a lot of your roads at this moment if you want to fit bike lanes. And yeah, you do need a strategy. Like I tried to commute to my work in the States, but they had nice bike lanes, but then suddenly they just stopped. And I think nobody thought about it. Yeah, we have a nice bike lane. And so then I was sort of stuck on this massive crossing with a lot of cars, and there was no way where I could go because nobody really thought about, what do you do next once you arrive there. And so yeah, so you do need planning. And also in the Netherlands, we have there's also a sort of cascading of how you design bicycle lanes. So if you're in a smaller city, bicycle lanes, usually don't have dedicated bicycle lanes. It's just the cars and bikes share the road. But when you connect two cities and you have a road that where cars drive at a higher speed, then you have protected bike lanes. And then there's a third category, which is like only bikes. So they're like bicycle highways connecting cities where there are no cars anymore.
Wow.
So yeah, so there are long stretches where with like 4 lanes for bikes. So yeah, I think you really need to think about how do you connect the different, for instance, here in Manila, how do you connect Quezon to Manila or to Pasig, and then within Quezon, people can just bike around because it's a smaller city. But how do you make those longer term connections? For that, you really need a plan, and the government, as I understand, well, they have that. But yeah, and then of course the next step is to integrate bike lanes and biking infrastructure from the get-go. So from when you design new cities or when you design new infrastructure, but that will be then the next step. Of course, now there's a lot of retrofitting that needs to happen if you want to integrate bikes. And I think that some cities could be bolder and could just say, no cars in certain areas. I think it's very well possible here. But of course, here in the Philippines, especially Manila, it's very much focused on cars, like going to the mall, going to the shopping mall. You go with your car, you park it somewhere. But it would be nice if you just close off certain areas, put more greenery in, because I think that's really missing here in Manila, especially. I think when you look at the percentage, it's very low in terms of parks and greenery, and it's important for not only for the city, it's for the people, but it's also for the air and for your quality of life. It's important to see trees and to have a park where it can go, which I think is sometimes missing here in Manila. But
I think what I got from what you said, Sir Peter, is like, we were able to have bike lanes, but we weren't able to understand it before putting it on. It's like the bike lanes here in the Philippines seems more like a little video game, like Sims per se. You just plot it on there, but when it got down to it, when actually trying to utilize it, like you said, at a crossing, you had no idea where to go. I think that's where the importance there about when it comes to bike lanes is able to have this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the example that the bike lane just stopped, that was from Washington, D.C. I think here, I think the government is doing, and especially if you go to Quezon City, for instance, they're doing a really good job trying to put in. Of course, you have to start somewhere, and then it's disconnected. Yeah. But then you fill it in, and the network becomes better, and then also more people use it. I think that is also important. And as you said, it started mainly during the pandemic. That now this whole push for biking, and I hope they keep it up. Here in Makati, you have a pretty big dedicated lane for bicycles, and I really hope that they keep it up even if the traffic comes back. So.
Yeah.
I was supposed to ask that, like, since the pandemic, since a lot of people went to switch to biking, do you think like when we go back to normal, or since the cases has been increasing, you think we'll revert back to being car-centric, cities,
or ditch the bikes?
Or we should switch the bikes, or maintain the bike lanes, maintain the bike city. What do you think?
I don't know. There's a risk that will happen, but I also see governments, national government, local governments, but also companies that we work with are very interested in promoting and keeping promoting biking. So we're working with the Makati Business Club here, and their members are very interested in how, as a company, can I stimulate my employees to bike and to come to work by bike, and that's a big question. And that's also, for instance, and we feel really bad about this, but we're in a big tower in Makati, but there's no bike parking in our tower. So we smuggle the bike in, which is a promotional material in our embassy. But when I come to bike to work, I have to park it somewhere else. And so those are kind of things that companies can also do, and that they're interested in, provide a dedicated parking space. provide showers where people can fresh up. That's what we have in the ministry in The Hague.
Oh,
if
wow.
you go to work, you can shower, and you have a locker where you can have your suit. So to make it easier for people to come to work. I really hope that people and companies will keep it up. I think there's a lot of dedication and ambition. But once it gets rainy season and maybe hot, and then people think, I might just take the jeepney or the bus.
Wait, so you bike to work and then you get ready at work?
Yes.
For work?
I don't mind. Well, in the Netherlands, I mean, it's not as hot as here, but I bike in my suit to work, and I just go to work. But some people they bike faster than me, or they have a longer commute, and so you can take a shower and you can change. And you have as I said, you have a locker where some people have like 2-3 suits in it. So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I've seen a building when I was in Prague. Like I just share this because it's really awesome. That's
Flex Malam.
That's actually one of their way to promote the biking thing among the employees. Like they have the parking for cars, of course, and then when you go like in the basement of their building, there's really like a huge space also for bikes. Like they have a charger for electric bikes. They have multiple lockers. They have what Sir Peter said, like shower areas. And the owner told us that since they did that, almost everyone in their employee like track or roster switched to bikes. So I really believe that one way of like promulgating all of this is starting from the higher ups, like starting from those big corporations and like promoting those kind of stuff so that people will really follow. So that's awesome. I hope we can do that too in the Philippines.
We also have something similar. Do you want to go first, Peter, before I share mine?
No, well, I wanted to say that, and you don't have to take your whole commute by bike. Some people just live far away, but you can. Like a colleague of mine, she bought a folding bike. So you take a long distance bus, and you take your bike. You take your bike with you, and then you just bike the last kilometer instead of waiting like half an hour for a jeepney or a local bus. You can just bike, and I think those kind of, if that happens more often, that people see sort of the benefit of taking the last mile with a bicycle, I think then people will continue to cycle. But if you're asking people to bike to work for 30 kilometers every day, then nobody's going to do that.
Because I like that you mentioned that, Zoo, because in Hong Kong, it's my turn with my country. Because in Hong Kong, they also just, not recently, but a few years ago, I think they introduced this this rentable bike station where it's literally where you park your bike and you put money in and you take the bike out and you just ride, and then you just find the nearest bike parking, you just return it. And that in itself showed like a drastic increase of people using bikes. So that put a question in minds that maybe people that are not biking aren't necessarily doing it because they don't want to bike. Maybe they just don't have a means to. And I think the city providing these bikes, more rental bikes, further encourage them to bike in the first place, which maybe we could see in the Philippines. Maybe it could work. We have rentable bike stations that we can like slot some coins in. That would be cool, because I know it's working in Hong Kong. Have you experienced something similar, Sir Peter, with like rentable bike stops? Have you seen those in the countries you've been in?
You have them in Washington D.C. I think I also saw them here in Makati and BGC.
Oh, okay.
I think they have. I haven't used them yet, but they have them there. I think those are and in the Netherlands it's quite big to rent these bike. We also had we call them the white bike plan, but this was in the 70s, and the bikes were free. and you could just use them and then leave them, and then somebody would pick them up until all the bikes were gone. So yeah, you need a good system to track all of them.
There was no system back then. It's just survival of the fittest bike.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, but in the Netherlands, you have another scheme, which is you can lease a bike, and you can actually recognize them. They have a blue tire at the front. And so
Okay.
you pay the company, I don't know the exact amount, like a certain amount per month. Something happens to your bike, you just bring it to them, you get a new one. They're simple bikes, but yeah, so you can lease them. So those are also good options for if you don't want to invest in a new bike or just want to try it. But yeah, so there are different kind of models that are being tried all around the world. To make it more easy or easier for people to use a bike and to
exactly.
Yeah.
Ikazo, did you want to say something?
I don't know. I would just say that we also have a scooter, like, scooter thing and rentable scooters. That's actually a thing too.
Oh yeah, that's starting to pop up now. Hey, like people with electric scooters on the road. I've seen one of those. I actually wanted to get one. It costs like 10K. 15K on Shopee.
Yeah. Oh my God, you're a Shopee guy too.
Who's not? I mean, that being said, because we talked about a lot of modes of transport, and I just wanted to ask, because I brought this up before, and let's talk about countries like Hong Kong, countries like India, countries like Philippines. A lot of things that these countries have in common, it's like their cityscapes are really tight and packed, and there's so many people with cars and tricycles and motorbikes, and let's compare it to a country like, the Netherlands, where it's, in Australia, where it's, there's a lot of, places you can find people riding bikes and walking around. So what do you think is the advantage, or we can say, what do you think is the disadvantages of a car-centric country?
Yeah, well, the disadvantage of car-centric countries, I see health and environment disadvantages. Of course, there's a lot of pollution if you have cars, you sit and you drive. But I think also it's, I don't know whether it's the right term, but it's a little bit undemocratic. I mean, the cars take up a lot of space. For very few people, and so if you look at the statistics, if you want to move people from A to B, a car is probably the least efficient mode of transport, because you can fit one, and if you're lucky, somebody will like car share, so they drive two people or a family.
Yeah.
But it takes up a lot of space on the road, and so if you want to be efficient in moving people around, bikes or buses are most efficient because you can fit most people, and that makes also the city less dense. I think if you have the cars. Today I had to go to Intramuros. Yeah, you're just in traffic jam like the whole way, almost, which is another big loss, because it's a loss of time and energy and fuel wasted. But so that's another thing I think what Manila could really benefit from is better public infrastructure, and I think the bus rapid transport corridors that they now have is a good start, and of course they're investing in the metro, but that takes a long time to come to be completed. So I think that's. By the way, it's of course also very busy here on the street. Yeah, you mentioned you have different modes of transport and cars crisscrossing and everything. But in the Netherlands, there's now also a trend where they put less markings on crossings, especially when it's bicycles and people, to confuse people actually. But that actually leads to safer, to fewer collisions or fewer accidents, because people know, like, oh, I have to pay attention. If you have like a bike lane that's just straight, and you can bike, and people they bike at higher speeds, and then if suddenly there's a crossing, then you come at it with a higher speed. Like in The Hague, it's a bit confusing. I'm not sure whether I like it, but you have bikes and people all on the same street. And so you have to be really careful and look, is there a bike coming? And can I cross or not? And but they say it's safer. I'm not so sure. But yeah,
Makes
so
more aware. Yeah.
yeah. So and that's another. There's a documentary, if you have the possibility to view it. It's called Why We Cycle, and it's more the psychology behind cycling. And one of the things is also that people that cycle, or cities where people cycle a lot, are friendlier, and people have more connection with each other. That's because if you sit in a car, you sit behind the windshield and a lot of metal around you, so you have little connection with the people who you share the road with. Whereas if you're on a bike, if there's a traffic light, you will be standing next to the person who you just overtook, so you have more connection. People can see each other better. They can actually look at each other and see each other's faces, and that makes it people feel that they're more connected with their city, which I think is another benefit of having non-motorized or at least non-car transport. I'm not saying that cars should be gone, from the streets, because they're
eradicate all cars.
Yeah. As a climate negotiator, I would, I don't know, but they have a function. But I think my preference would be for smaller cities where you can use micro mobility, or walking, biking, scooters. Where you have more connection with people and you're more out in the open, less pollution.
Yeah. I think I'll have to agree with Sir Pieter there, because one of really the disadvantage of being a car-centric city is, I don't know if it's just me, but it makes the city worse. I mean, if you're really focusing more on cars, I don't know how to revert it to not focus on cars anymore. Because if you give way too much, priority, or you prioritize cars more, like you'll always have to chop your sideways of the road to bring more roads, so traffic, it's, I don't know why they haven't realized it yet here, but they keep on expanding the road thinking that it will ease traffic, where in reality it doesn't.
Yeah. And also what Sir Pieter said about why people cycle in general, it makes them more connected with other people and the environment. I think that's an important thing to note, because if we look at a car-centric city, let's say you're gonna go somewhere in a car to a city, right? It's literally just you from point A to point B, and that's it. You're not taking into consideration, or there seems to be a disconnect with the environment in general. When you're going to that place, and the people, as per, if you ride a bike, I guess you better appreciate your surroundings, because you're literally, just on a bike, and it's just you all around. So I do resonate with that idea, because back in Australia, I would also ride my bike to school when I was in grade school. And it was actually, it's a different experience, because in the car you can do anything. You're distracted, you can fall asleep and wake up, you're in your destination. But it's like what they say, it's not about the destination, it's the journey. Right. And only bikes can do that. Only, being in the environment are you able to realize that. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I'll add the health benefit that it will bring. Imagine cycling every day, the metabolism is spiking up, all the cholesterol will burn down. So I think it's really a great thing for people, or a city, to focus on these things, rather than, because I don't know where did they get the notion that want to consider a city to be urbanized or progressive. A lot of people are using cars, but in reality, it's so bad. It just gets worse.
Yeah, but I agree. So that being said, Sir Pieter, what do you think is the importance with what I said and what you mentioned as well about having the capacity to connect with the environment? Why is this important in the first place? Because I think that question alone would answer or convince people why they should bike in general. What's the importance of being connected with the environment of your surroundings, rather than just getting to the destination?
Well, I don't know. Well, when you asked the question, what came to mind to me is that there is research where they track people's happiness.
Oh,
But some of so they asked people whose commute was through along a highway, and then they
okay.
asked the same questions to other people who had a commute through nature. And the people who would bike through nature are just happier than the people who would bike along a highway. And so, yeah, I think that for me, and just being out in nature makes people happier. Apparently, the color green also makes people happier. So yeah, connection with nature. Yeah, of course, I'm a biologist, so for me, nature and environment is very important. So I think just having, it makes you just feel happier, which I think makes you as a better person. So that for me makes it important, and it's also, well, that's more for children, especially in the Netherlands. It also gives a bigger sense of freedom. Because with the bicycle, everybody can walk, but with the bicycle you're slightly more mobile, so you have more opportunities to explore. And that's another thing. They say that children in the Netherlands always score very high on sort of the happiest children in the world, and we
Wow.
I believe that it's because of the biking. It's because you have more autonomy. You have as a parent, sometimes it's a bit scary, you just, go out and bike to the other side of the town. But, it's for children, it's very important to have that autonomy and to be able to scope out their surroundings. And as I said, having connection with nature, being outside, being able to connect with people, connect with nature, which makes you more happier, I think is an important aspect of cycling. So it's,
since we're like getting bikings already, do you think it's also possible in cities like Manila or cramped cities to promote or like to have more of the walkability within the people, because I don't know it, but for me, I like to walk. Like I love enjoying my moment, going from point A to point B. It's so nice. So, and I think it has a lot of benefits too. So, Sir Peter, what's your take about the walkability from within the city?
I think well, the weather, of course, plays an important role in that, and it can be quite warm and sweaty. I mean, I did not grow up in a tropical country, so maybe I'm suffering more than others. Although, but I think here what I really appreciate, for instance, here in Makati, where I walk also a lot, is that you also have like shaded areas or across the walk paths, the canopies. And I know that, for instance, the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, is investing here in the Philippines also in what they call greenways connections. So it's canopy connected walkways, elevated walkways. So I think that's here is good. What sometimes, and you also mentioned it, that cars are taking up more and more space in roads. But sometimes the sidewalks are just non-existent or very small or very occupied by others, and that limits walkability, or at least makes it a little bit more dangerous, I think. Other than that, I think it's really good. And I enjoy today I was in Intramuros, just walk around, and that's a really beautiful part of the city. So it's
Yeah, I mean, I understand where Zoo is coming from, because it's also like, I mean, I could relate, because me and my friends after school, when we decide to go somewhere, it's like, oh, how are we gonna get there? Do you guys want to walk? And everyone just has like that sour look on their face, like, what? Why do you want to walk? It's so hot. Like, are you crazy? And I think that brings into perspective, like, some people recognizing that people don't want to walk because of the weather, so they counter it by making roads wider for more vehicle access, I guess. But I think it ties down to, you know, applying the environment to reduce the the weathering effects or the existing climate effects, you know, because I think Kate and Zoo can also attest to this when we study about, you know, tropical architecture. It's a lot of it is heavy use of the environment, the existing environment, and adding vegetation to reduce this to reduce the heat level, right? So I think it's all about perspective, you know, and it comes down to how we're going to tackle the problem. Because if the problem is heat, right? If people don't want to walk because it's too hot, then there's more ways of countering it rather than just using, you know, let's just have more cars, you know. Why don't rather than why don't we make it easier for people to walk rather than people don't want to walk in general, you know what I mean? So I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
being that said, how do you guys think, or Sir Peter, let's start with you. How do you think where should we start in, like, you know, achieving this?
Buy a bike now. The link is down below. Buy a bike.
This is not sponsored. Yeah, like seriously, Sir Peter, like where do you think we should start on this? On how are we going to make our city more livable, like, you know, harmoniously living together with bikes, with reduced carways, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah, I gave that a little bit of thought in the past couple of days, but I really think that bikes is one, but I think good public transport, mass transport, that's another one. That's really necessary, because then you take people off cars off the street, at least. Like in Tokyo, they have also 25 million people, but you know, it's not that busy on the street because you have this massive transport system underground, and it just moves around people. You can get anywhere in the city using the subway. But yeah, that's going to take a long time. And I think the good first steps have been made by retrofitting some bike lanes in, working on standards also on what bike lanes should look like and how to make them safe. I think that's important. Getting the private sector involved and so that they also give incentives to their employees to come to work by bike. Like in the Netherlands, you can buy a bike and you get taxes back through the government, some scheme. So it's slightly cheaper to buy a bike. I think those are things. And one of the things I also mentioned is see if you can invest in more green. And I think there's that's really necessary. Well, I'm talking about Manila. I mean, not some of the other cities still have a lot of green, which is very good. Like Ilo, we worked with them, and they have a very good bike lane system, and it's still quite green. But Manila, it really lacks greenery, and but of course, there's a lot of pressure on land to build housing and commercial real estate. I understand that, but at a certain point, your city becomes, it's difficult to live in if you don't have enough green spaces for people to relax and enjoy themselves. So those are sort of my I don't know where to start first. I don't know. It's a big agenda. A lot of things need to be done, but. Yeah.
I mean, I actually agree with what Sir Peter said regarding, investing in green, because my father is actually an engineer, and I always asked him, because in Hong Kong, I mentioned this before, how we also have an underground train system. And I always asked him, like, why don't we just implement that in the Philippines? I mean, if one thing is working in this place, I mean, why can't we just translate it in the Philippines? And of course, he laughed at me, and he said that it's the archipelago of Philippines. It just doesn't allow for an underground train system, and that brings to light that just because one effective transport is working to help alleviate how do you say this, carcentricness that doesn't mean there aren't other ways, and we can look into investing green, like what Sir Peter said, to help, I guess, convince people to walk more, to bike more. I guess that's a first step. So that being said, buy a bike now. Link down below.
I think we should plant seed now. Like,
Yeah.
seeds.
But I guess throughout the podcast, we really learned about how the importance of riding a bike, because I think people forget the purpose of the bike, because people think that it's too hassle. Like, you ride a bike and you're sweaty and it's hot and you're going to the mall, in your clothes, your drip. You don't want to ruin your drip, when you go to the mall. But not only that, we should look at it as a means of transport, like going to work, going to school, in that kind of sense. I think that was the main takeaway of what we talked about today, as well as able to apply nature and appreciate it and be connected, because apparently we'll be more happy, if we're be biking. So the Pursuit of Happiness movie, it should have been about a bike. Okay, guys. So, how about you, Zoo?
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you guys. Like, it's about all the a city should be always be there for the people, because it always includes the people's welfare. How are we going to survive it in a city? Because I don't think we're all going to survive in a car-centric cities, because it's like where there are more cars than people. So yeah, it's really important to prioritize the people, the environment, the places that we're living. So I guess we could really start for that. And besides buying a bike now, guys,
buy a scooter.
It'll help you guys, to be plantitas, those hobbies you had in the pandemic, first part of the pandemic. It's really helping. Yeah.
How about you, Sir Peter? Before we finish up in this podcast of ours, what's your final message to the non-bikers out there, or the or a little something about the work of yours that you'd like to share with everyone before we end?
No, buy a bike. No, it's buy a Dutch bike. No.
Not just any bike, a Dutch bike.
Dutch bike.
Yeah. No. As an embassy, I mean, of course, I like to talk about biking. I mean, it's in our genes or in our nature, I think, as Dutch people. But we're also working with the government, with NGOs, with Bikers Unite movement, and some other groups on promoting cycling. And as you said, I mean, we're not here to promote Dutch way of cycling or Dutch solutions or something, because as you say, every city, has its own restrictions or its own history or its own culture. But at least we can share what we do and what we like, and then you can say, well, this fits for us, or why don't we do it like this? And I think that's the way also that it should grow. It's sort of organically. You cannot put it in and just say, now everybody's going to cycle. So that's well. Because thank you for inviting me and giving me also the opportunity to talk to you about this topic. And I really hope everybody go out, buy a bike now.
Buy a bike.
Dutch bike.
Dutch bike, orange bike. Then that's our national color. So well, thank you, and it was great to be on the podcast.
All right. Thank you very much, Sir Peter. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the Deputy Head of Mission of the Netherlands Embassy, once again, Honorable Pieter Terpstra. Thank you, sir, for coming with us today.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Peter. And don't forget to buy a bike.
All right. So I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in. This has been Josh Daquipil, joined by...
Of course, this is Zoo Bennett, or you can call me Zoo from UAPSA-NU. And we're here for the season 9 of UAPSAlitaan. the vulnerable, and the vernacular. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in our next podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. And cut.
Well, yeah.
Buy a bike.
Bye,
Buy
bye.
a bike.